Sometimes you feel like the doctor telling the client they have cancer and they're freaking out and they're going ballistic and they're
hmm
crying. But you have to take joy in your mind that we're actually going to be able to save your life because we can get you on a chemo treatment, but you have to take joy from that. But it does wear you down, person after person after person, feeling like, they're disappointed as you let them know, like, that school that you think maybe you got a 50-50 shot at? Well, our school research indicates that might be a little tougher. So, Vince Garcia, my friend, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me back. It's been a little bit of time.
Kicking off the YouTube channel, and this is your first appearance on YouTube. And of course, we're doing this series on most frequently asked questions that we get as counselors, admissions folks, and we're going to dive in today with a really important one.
How do I work with my counselor?
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to take on this question. How can I work more effectively with my school counselor? Vince, take it where you want to go, and I'll chime in with some thoughts after we get your insights.
Sure. I think the most important thing is make sure that you hit their deadlines. Depending on how your school works, they may have big general meetings and then divvy everything out. More and more, I'm seeing college counseling programs, public and private, put everything in a Google Classroom and they kind of outline everything when things are due and their links are due. So if you're hitting their deadlines, you're moving towards the top in terms of who's this person hitting all my deadlines. So definitely do that. And a lot of schools, they have an initiation meeting. Sometimes it's with the whole family, so parents and student, and then sometimes it's student and then parents separately. But I always recommend that after those meetings that you send a note, because what you're trying to help that person do, because remember, they don't know who you are. They've seen you walk the halls for 2 years, depending on the school that you're at. They've seen you maybe come into the office and ask about summer programs or attend a college meeting, but they don't really know who you are. And even though you may have a high profile at the school, maybe you're a leader in music or theater, they may not be aware of that. So when you send that follow-up email after you have meetings with them and express gratitude, I'm never going to forget who you are. In
Right.
my mind, I've already cemented like this person is grateful. They appreciate my time. They're really respectful. So hitting deadlines and then initiating conversation with them through an email afterwards is always a positive.
Sure, you see a lot of this like I do. A lot of schools will give students and parents these forms to fill out before, where they call them brag sheets or
hmm
whatever. And
hmm
it's just their way
hmm
to, it's like an intake form. Because I'm sure you get this, like I get it. Like parents and students give them to me. Like, what should I say? How should I answer this? That's another important thing for a deadline. Hit the deadline on that. Another thing I think is really important is learning the system well, whether it's Score, Naviance, Maya Learning, whatever system is used. Because that you really need to know that. Like, is that going to be a recommendation? I've had schools where they do the teacher recs through Common App
hmm
and they just use like Score and Naviance maybe for all the communication and let you know such and such school is coming and we're doing interviews or deadlines or I need to know your early decision school by X date. Like learning those systems really, really well is another thing that I think a lot of people don't do that really helps you to be more effective. But go ahead. It sounds like you're going to say something else.
Yeah. And I think, as you said, with that first initial brag sheet meeting where you're giving them a sense of who you are. Some schools ask 5 questions, many schools ask 40. You want to give them complete answers. And you have to remember, this is besides the conversations with you, this may be the only intake form they get. So they say, why would you like to study? It says, why would you like to study this major? And your answer is because I like chemistry, because I like to explore molecules. And that's your answer. You're not helping them get to know you and give full information when they're writing that recommendation. So taking that brag sheet seriously. And sometimes in the brag sheet, I tell students because they are afraid of repeating themselves. I said, sometimes it takes the counselor 3 times to read it before they
Mm.
realize like, oh, well, here's the theme. Here's the impact. Here's the meat. So doing a good job with the material that they give you, turning it in on time, and then sending correspondence afterwards is really a good deal. Now, another way to sort of get on the radar is when they have those meetings, make sure that you're there and that in your conversations with them, you reference different parts of the meetings that were particularly helpful. I found when I worked on the high school side, we had admissions ambassadors. The students who became admissions ambassadors, basically what those students were is they met with the representatives, because college counselors were often meeting with seniors, sometimes juniors, parents, and they didn't spend a lot of time with the admissions reps because their focus was making sure they were launching a class. So we had admissions counselors that came from Lawrence or Harvard or Stanford or wherever, and they met with them. And if no one showed up at the meeting, they had questions, and writing the write up afterwards, sending that to the college counselor was really helpful. I think it's also important to remember what the parent's role is. And sometimes with the counselor, you'll have a tendency, because the parents are used to communicating with the school for you. But as you get closer to that, age where you're about to turn 18, you need to take responsibility, go into the office, make those meetings yourself. You have a question, it should be coming from the student. If the student doesn't hear back from the counselor, sometimes including like a parent on the email in the CC can help move it along. But you really want to engage the counselor and the counseling office in ways that are helpful. So if you want to make sure your college counselor knows you and they have an admissions ambassador program, you should give it a shot. You'll learn so
Vince,
many skills.
a couple other things. Go in 10th grade, introduce yourself.
Mhm.
Early before the school starts its standard process, and come in teachable. Say, obviously say a little bit about yourself and say, I want to take advantage of all that you have to offer. Do you have any advice for me? Are there any resources that I can start looking at now? Like that will make a really good impression. But understand that counselor is going to have communication in your file, through the correspondence they have as part of the application. And the more selective the school is, the more those third party substantiators, counselor rec, teacher rec, other rec, they can play a very, very big role in whether or not you come across as inspirational, compelling.
Mhm.
Because experienced readers can tell when those third party substantiators are enthusiastic about somebody, or if it's just sort of like meh, or, typical kind of kid. And the more selective they're looking for that kid that the school's going to miss greatly, that school that student had a big impact in the certain personal qualities they're looking for. And so that level of enthusiasm will come through, and the counselor is more likely to really say those type of superlative things. So I
Mhm.
would say going in early, introducing yourself is good. These are just things that Vince and I like now on our counseling side, right? So, and Vince and I have both done school-based counseling and independent counseling and admissions.
Mhm.
But I love it when someone is like, listen, give it to me straight. I want to know, like, if you think my chances aren't that great at school, like, I want to know that, because most people actually are not really prepared to receive that. The overwhelming majority of people underestimate the competition. They overestimate themselves. They have no idea how hard it is to get into selective schools. And that wears you down, hearing that person after person after person after person. I've often said in this job, Vince, that this sounds really macabre, but sometimes you feel like the doctor telling the client they have cancer, and they're freaking out and they're going ballistic and they're
Mhm.
crying. But you have to take joy in your mind that we're actually going to be able to save your life because we can get you on a chemo treatment plan. You have to take joy from that. But it does wear you down, person after person after person, feeling like, they're disappointed as you let them know, like, that school that you think maybe you got a 50-50 shot at. Well, our school research indicates that might be a little tougher. So if you can, like, give them permission to be totally honest with you, if you think some of the schools, like, what my chances are, like, I want to be able to receive it. I don't want to be the person who thinks I'm totally different. That will be like a breath of fresh air, because they're not getting that very often,
Mhm.
and I would also say listen to them when they mention some schools, because they might know that such and such school hasn't taken a kid from us in 4 years and they really want to get somebody this year. And you look like the kind of kid who they might want, or they might know we're not going to have that many applicants to this school, and you could maybe stand out in that pool. I'm not saying you don't do your own research and still vet it, but listen really carefully. Of course, there's a big difference if we're talking between private and public schools here. We
Mhm.
have a private school counselor where someone's come from admissions, has a small caseload, has tons of communication. They might have a much greater level of scope of knowledge than someone with 5 or 600 on their caseload who doesn't come from an admissions background. And we're kind of talking about both here. The other thing I'll say, and then see if you have anything else, is when you come to those information sessions, come extremely well prepared.
Mhm.
Have done your research on those school, ask great questions. We'll do other videos on what great questions are, because you're actually you're representing the school, and you're going to make the school look great.
Mhm.
If you come in and you comport yourself in a way that has the admission officers impressed, that just helps other kids who come behind you, not just for this year's class, but for years to come. That probably increases the chances that they'll come back next year.
Yeah.
So those are things you can do. So yeah, I don't want to hog the mic. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I think one more thing. Sometimes, it's challenging to go talk to somebody that you have never had a conversation with. That those college counselors, they seem legendary. You're hearing all this, static in the air about different counselors. One way to engage them, as Mark said, is, go and introduce yourself. But sometimes you need a project, like you need a reason to do that. That helps you overcome the nervousness or anxiousness you might have about approaching, like, what feels like a complete stranger. The easiest conversation to have is when you have something to talk about. So I want to do these summer programs. Do you have suggestions? These are the summer things that I'm thinking about doing. Or, oh, I heard about this great leadership program. Do you know anyone who did this? So if you have something to talk about them with, you'll find that the person is really receptive. And one of the things I remember, you sparked a good memory for me, Mark, when students brought back to me something I didn't know, like, oh, there's
Mhm.
this scholarship, or there's this program, or my friend at Harvard Westlake did this. And I was like, what? And
Mhm.
they gave you new information. So when you learn something new and you bring it and share it, they won't forget your name.
Yeah, we're always learning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're always learning. No, this is great. And for parents, set up a meeting and ask the counselor, like, what can I do to best support my student in this process? Like, what are the things that you see, maybe mistakes people make or missed opportunities? Like, what can I do to best support my student? That doesn't mean you can't ask other questions. You might legitimately want to know things like, people want to know things like, hey, I've heard a rumor that only apply to 12 schools. Is that true? Or whatever. I'm just throwing this out. Like, you have the right to ask other questions beyond that, but ask is if the counselor sees you as somebody who is supporting what they're doing, that's going to lead to the most amicable relationship. And that's in your student's best interest as well, versus, oh, this person's an irritant or squeaky wheel or adversarial. If it's really bad, I mean, there's been exception. There's been cases where school counselors have communicated that to colleges off the record.
You
So
don't want to be that person.
you do
Just,
not want to be that dude or dudess, as I say.
go everyone. If you haven't ever seen the movie Election with Tracy Flick, you don't want to be Tracy Flick.
I think I got a movie I need to go see, Vince. You got me
When you,
curious.
when you see Tracy Flick, Reese Witherspoon, and bang up job with Matthew Broderick as I think he's a counselor.
Wow.
Maybe even college counselor. Everyone will know. Everyone who has seen it knows what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
There we go.
She's just annoying. Like
Yeah. There we go.
she's like that fly that flew in and you can't get rid of it for
Can't get
12 days.
it. Hey,
Well,
Vince. Thanks, my friend. Appreciate you doing this, and we'll look forward to having you come back and do some more in this series.
that'd be great.